Arataki Itto is one of the strongest characters, not gonna lie, the damage he deals is actually quite huge. But with great power also comes great responsibility. Behind all the massive attacks he delivers, there are some sacrifices that must be made. And of course, as a DPS, Arataki Itto also has some weaknesses that prevent players from pulling on his banner, investing, or even using him again for permanent content like Spiral Abyss. In this video, I will point out some issues that may contribute to these occurrences, which make Arataki Itto a character that can be considered underrated, strong but overlooked by many. Let's get started. Arataki Itto's role in Genshin Impact is solely that of a DPS. In terms of delivering massive damage, Itto seems to excel in that aspect, indicating that there's no issue with the amount of damage that he can deal. Additionally, Itto's hitbox doesn't appear to be too small. He can still attack enemies beside him, and his charge attacks can even reach airborne foes, like Thunder Manifestation for example. So on AoE damage is not much of a problem for him. Looking at his constellations, it seems his performance will continue to improve as it increases. And Itto isn't a character whose full potential is locked behind his first or second constellation, which is a positive news. So I guess there's no issue or problem with his constellations also. However, one concern lies in the comfort of playing and the consistency of the damage he deals, which leads us to his kit issues. Arataki Itto's main source of damage comes from his elemental burst, which has an energy cost of 70. It can be said that the damage of Itto can inflict on enemies only occurs when he uses his elemental burst, making him 100% reliant on it. Without using this ability, his performance will drastically decrease. The damage from his elemental skill, Mr. Ushi, is also significantly boosted only when he is in the burst mode. Unlike characters like Ayaka or Eula, who also rely on their elemental burst, but they can at least do something outside of their burst, such as Ayaka's charge attack infused with cryo or Eula's normal attack that still deals decent damage and can be useful for contributing to team's overall damage. So basically you can't do anything with Itto if his energy bar is not full. Additionally, Itto also becomes a somewhat selfish DPS because he wants the spotlight for himself, which prevents him from being swapped with other characters while in burst mode. Considering his relatively high energy cost and heavy reliance on it, Arataki Itto is also less suitable for completing Spiral Abyss stages that has multiple waves enemies, because it can be quite difficult to replenish his energy, especially if enemies have elemental shields like Fatui and Shadowy Husks. This would consume both time and energy for Itto just to deplete their shields, not to mention requiring a second rotation of his burst to be able to finally defeat them. Now, let's discuss Itto's competitors in the game. Since Itto's role is a Claymore DPS, it seems quite valid to compare him with Navia, and it is safe to say that Navia is one of Itto's competitors that we will discuss in this section. Why her? The answer seems quite clear. They are both Claymore users capable of delivering significant raw damage. Navia can do this without fully relying on her elemental burst, and it has a relatively low energy cost. Not only that, she can easily obtain Geo Infusion quickly by pressing her skill that has 2 charges, unlike Itto who needs to use his burst. Since Navia utilizes crystallized reactions to improve her raw Geo damage, her team is more flexible and not restricted to only Geo, as it would contradict her passive ability which requires her to stand with a different element. Furthermore, what can make Navia a preferable choice over Itto is the flexibility of her role. While Navia is a main DPS, she can also serve as a sub DPS and engage in quick swap in certain teams. For example, in a team like this, you can make Noelle the main DPS and occasionally swap to slip in Navia's skill. It can also be observed that Navia's companions in most setup are mostly 4-star characters, contrasting with Itto's team where almost all his companions are 5-star characters that require huge investment. Speaking of Noelle, this mate can also be considered a rival to Arataki Itto. Perhaps players are already comfortable playing with her and decide not to pull for Itto, who should have been a 5-star upgrade from Noelle. They both can use the same weapon and scale with defense, and the choices for F2P weapons are also the same as well. However, with the increasing number of updates, Noelle has indirectly received more buffs and greater benefits since the arrival of Furina. Actually, Itto is also a suitable partner for Furina, but other characters utilize her utility better, and some even benefit more from Furina's buffs. But back to Noelle, her gameplay is more flexible. She is a main DPS but not a selfish one, as players can easily swap to other characters without disrupting or losing the effect of her elemental burst. Additionally, Noelle is more suitable with Furina because she can attack while providing healing. And it's not just a heal for the active character, but a team party heal. The amount of healing is also quite substantial, so it can consistently fill Furina's fanfare stacks, thus maximizing the buffs provided. As for Arataki Itto, like I said, he can also use Furina, but for now we are lacking a Geo healer. Although C4 Gorou can provide healing, I think other units can utilize Furina's buff much better than Itto, such as Navia for example. If you are talking about Navia, raw damage DPS like him and Lini can be said to not heavily rely on damage from elemental reactions. Although it's still possible to play Vaporize with Navia and Lini, most of the time their kits are indeed designed for mono-elemental play, similar to Itto. For some players who do not enjoy reactions, they may prefer to spend their primogems on these two characters rather than Itto, because of the variety in team compositions and support options that are available for them. And of course, their performance can be considered better than Itto's, although Itto actually does have a lot of potential. And then we have another competitor, but this time it's not a character but reactions. We have plenty of reactions already. Even amplifying reactions like Vaporize and Melt are already popular just before Itto released. But let's look at the Dendro element for instance. After the release of Dendro, which heavily emphasizes on reactions, Geo has been constantly ignored by players due to the contrast in the variety of reactions these two elements offer. Dendro has a wide range of reactions, and one of them is Hyper Bloom that is very powerful, making it easy for players to complete Spiral Abyss without worrying about any mechanical difficulties and rotations. The composition of Hyper Bloom teams is also very F2P friendly and diverse, so players may not get bored playing with them. Dendro also provides many reactions such as Burning that can be used for melt reactions, Fridge, Hyper Fridge, Urgent, Aggravate, Spread, and Super Bloom with Nilo. And each reaction requires a different team composition and characters. On the other hand, Mono Geo relies only on characters of the same element, and not all of them can synergize well with Itto. Additionally, Hoyo temporarily halted the release of Geo characters when patch 3.0 arrived until Navia and Chiori were introduced, which is already patch 4.3 and above. This delay in releasing a new Geo characters also further delays a new suitable buffer for Itto to be released, thus indirectly saying that Hoyo still holding back his true potential for the future, and players might forget that he and of course Geo exist at that time. Some players enjoy playing with reactions because the game revolves around them, but there are also players who want to play with non-reaction teams, like Itto and Gorou, but unfortunately Hoyo rarely release a new unit that is suitable for them to work in one team, which we will discuss in the team issue section after this. Actually, Itto's team is not necessarily Mono Geo if you look at his kit, but for now the support that greatly helps and synergizes with him is Gorou, who requires the team to consist of all Geo elements to fully utilize his kit. This is often misunderstood by players. It's Gorou, not Itto, that limits his team composition. Also, since Geo has no reactions with elements other than Crystallize, and somehow Itto doesn't utilize these reactions in his kit like Navia does, indirectly making the best team for Itto a Mono Geo team with Gorou as the best support. The same goes for Albedo, who struggles to get damage boosts from other characters because his scaling relies on defense. So when we put them in the same team, they seem very harmonious. This team could be considered exclusive and requires a high investment because they heavily depend on members of their own element. Ironically, not all characters in the element synergize well with Arataki Itto, such as Yunjin, Ningguang, Noelle, and Navia. This leaves only a few Geo characters who can synergize with Arataki Itto. Gorou is a support that can only be used in an Itto team or a Geo team because for now he is one of the units that can maximize Itto's performance. This means that when you build Itto, you also have to build Gorou. The same goes for Albedo. In the worst case scenario, you might need C6 Gorou if your Itto is C0 and you don't have Red Horn to help increase his damage. What makes players reluctant to use this team is that you invest so much in these characters, but their scope of work is very limited to forming only one team, and it's not flexible to work with other units. In cases like Ayaka Premium Freeze team, although this is her best team and full of 5-star limited characters, but each of them can work with other units. For example, Kokomi can work in a Dendro team or even with a Taser team, and Kazuha can literally fit into any team that needs VV and crowd control. But despite all that, one advantage of this type of team is that it can help players easily build other teams because Itto doesn't share his support with any other teams, nor does he steal support from others. He doesn't need Xingqiu, Sucrose, Bennett, Xiangling, Kazuha or Yelan, so you don't have to compete for these characters to form other teams. To survive, Arataki Itto doesn't actually need Zhongli that much. Of course, Zhongli's presence here also helps Itto increase his damage because his skill reduces all enemy elemental resistance and his pillar periodically attacks and providing particles for Itto. However, the elemental shreds can already be obtained from Geo-Resonance. Zhongli can be replaced with other shielders, for example using Diona or even C4 Layla, who can provide charge attack buffs. Basically, Itto already has a good resistance to interruptions, so it's a bit overkill to pair him with Zhongli. You can use Zhongli for other teams that need him more, such as teams with Yoimiya, Ganyu, or Lini. However, we are going back to the main issue I mentioned earlier, which is Gorou, the only buffer useful for Itto and simultaneously restrict his team composition. Itto needs a significant damage boost from C6 Gorou, which requires 3 Geo members in the party to activate this. So, considering the remaining Geo members available, Zhongli is chosen as the best sustainer in Itto's case. Thus, this team slowly becomes too exclusive and expensive to invest in. Besides Gorou, another buffer that is also suitable for Itto is Mona. However, unfortunately, I don't think Mona alone is enough to replace Gorou's role as a buffer. You still need him, and that's why you can combine both Gorou and Mona in one team to boost Itto's damage. Although Mona's buff duration is not more than 5 seconds and only applies to a few instances of Itto's charge attack, at least there is another buffer unit outside of the Geo element that can work with Itto. Although Mona's performance excels in freeze teams like with Ayaka, for example, it's still acceptable to use this kind of team composition. Does Mona work with him? I guess so, but is she the best buffer for him? Somehow she works but may not be the best option. This is also similar to when using Bennett in Itto's team. He can still work with him since Itto can still benefit from attack boost, though not as much as with defense. But then again, Bennett is not the best buffer for him and is greatly needed in other teams. We are still waiting to see if there will be someone in the future who can provide optimal buffs for Itto and stop him from relying on Gorou. Which will direct our attention to Chiori, the new Geo character who has just been released. If Navia can't save Geo because she saved herself from it by being a flexible unit that can work with other elements, then only Chiori can be the hope for Itto. But it turns out she's just the Inazuman version of female Albedo wearing a kimono. Don't get me wrong, Chiori will work really well with Itto and might even replace Albedo in his team with her Geo Constructs gimmick and nuke damage from her ultimate, which is more useful than Albedo's. But unfortunately, Hoyo didn't introduce a new character that is a buffer unit to replace Gorou's role in Itto's team, and instead released another Albedo. This certainly keeps Itto still bound and shackled to Mono Geo. Or instead, maybe they could just make Chiori a Geo healer, and this way Itto can now properly work with Furina, who is one of the best buffers in the game right now, and this way players can no longer depend on C4 Gorou for heals. But it turns out she's just another sub DPS with a repetitive gameplay. Well, reality hurts. Arataki Itto is not suitable for exploring new maps because his skills cannot be used to reach high places like Zhongli's Pillar or Albedo's Elevator. Additionally, he lacks skills to increase your running speed or anything that would make exploration faster, unlike characters like Yelan, Sayu, and Wanderer. Moreover, it seems quite difficult to feel his energy because Itto heavily relies on his burst to defeat enemies. When using his ultimate, the enemies are likely to be defeated quickly, making the rest of the ult duration pointless. He becomes powerless without his ultimate. If you still enjoy using Itto and want to use him for exploring new maps, it is recommended to bring along another DPS or at least sub DPS to make it easier to defeat enemies. However, besides that, Arataki Itto has utility passive abilities that are still very useful. There is a 25% chance to obtain a higher quantity of wood when gathering materials for the teapot. I can't say this is not useful because there are players who enjoy arranging furniture in teapot mode, and somehow Itto's passive is useful for them. Aside from all of that, another reason why Itto can still be considered popular among players, even though his performance and potential are still somewhat lacking, is his personality. This is what makes Itto a unique character. He is the goofiest character in Genshin Impact, and if you notice, he has appeared quite frequently in various events. If I'm not mistaken, it might be more than 5 or 6 times he has appeared in events and quests. That's because he spices things up with his personality, making some of these events interesting, less boring, and comical. Even in the previous Cooking Mama, even at the beginning of patch 4.4, he appeared as a representative of Inazuma region, even though it wasn't an event centered around him. Personality-wise, he wins most players' hearts and attention. So, what do you think? What's your overall experience playing with Itto? Are you bothered by his current performance? Or do you still enjoy playing with him and don't really care since you love his personality and all? Let me know in the comments, and please tell me if there are some points about Itto that I missed. If you enjoy this type of video, please hit like button and subscribe to this channel now to help Cat Balloony to grow. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications because after this, I will discuss and analyze about Arlecchino's kit, so don't miss it. Goodbye and have a beautiful day.